When my mother finally looked back, rain pelted the rusty zinc roof of the old village church, and thunder cracked the night sky like an angry god's whip. Inside the church compound, nothing stirred, except for the quiet sobs of a woman cradling a wrapped bundle in her arms. Her name was Iphioma. Only 22, but her eyes looked 40, heavy with sadness and shame. The bundle in her arms, a baby girl, slept peacefully, unaware of the storm outside or the storm inside her mother's heart. Iphioma knelt in the mud, just beneath the old wooden sign that read St. Anthony's Catholic Church, Amuniochi Parish. Her trembling hands loosened the wrapper covering the baby's face and gazed at the child with eyes swollen from hours of weeping. "You will hate me one day," she whispered, choking on tears. "But one day, maybe, just maybe, you will understand." She kissed the baby's forehead, tucked a faded piece of cloth with a blue flower into the side of the wrapper, and left her name, Chisholm, scribbled in shaky ink on a torn paper tucked underneath. Then, like a shadow, she disappeared into the night. That was the day she left me. I don't remember it, of course. But the story has been told to me again and again by the nuns who found me at dawn, how I didn't cry, how I seemed so calm, as though I knew I had just been let go by someone who loved me but couldn't keep me. They said I was beautiful. Big eyes. A strange birthmark shaped like a teardrop behind my left ear. The kind of child you'd expect to be carried with pride. But pride was a luxury Iphioma couldn't afford. St. Anthony's orphanage, as it came to be called, became my world. The walls were cracked, the food was often not enough, and new faces came and went, some adopted, others abandoned again by relatives who promised to return. But I stayed. And I learned to stop expecting. By the time I turned 7, I had memorized every inch of the orphanage. The smell of boiled beans that clung to the air. The cold concrete floor where we knelt to pray every morning. And most of all, the little wooden chest under Sister Agatha's bed, where she kept items found with abandoned children. That was where my wrapper lived. I used to sneak into her room at night, just to open the chest and touch it. It was faded now, the blue flower barely visible, but it was all I had of her. My mother. I imagined she must have been poor. Or sick. Or maybe she died. That thought comforted me more than the idea that she was alive and simply didn't want me. Why did she leave me? I asked Sister Agatha one night, my voice small and broken. She must have had her reasons, my dear, the old nun said gently. Some mothers leave because they're weak. Some because they think it's best. But no good mother leaves without crying every step of the way. By 12, I had stopped crying over her. I told myself I didn't care. But every time someone came to adopt, and they picked someone else, it scraped the wound open again. I began to hide that pain behind anger, fierce, sharp anger that lashed out at anyone who dared talk about mothers. One day, a volunteer group visited us. They brought food, toys, and one of those, "You are special," talks. I sat at the back, refusing to smile, until the speaker asked, "Who here knows their parents?" The room was silent. I stood up slowly and answered, "No one here does. That's why we are here. Don't come and remind us of what we don't have." I was taken to the head nun afterward for correction. But instead of punishment, she handed me a book. "Read this. The world owes you nothing. But education can give you everything." That was the turning point that I began to study harder than everyone else. I didn't want to be just another girl in an orphanage. I wanted to become someone important. Someone my mother would regret leaving behind. At 16, I won a scholarship to a private secondary school. It was like entering another world. The students wore expensive shoes, spoke polished English, and carried iPhones. I arrived with worn slippers and an old backpack. They laughed at me. Whispered words like bush girl, abandoned child, and church rat. But I didn't care. I carried my pain like armor. And inside me burned a fire that their laughter only fed. One night, in the school library, I found a medical textbook. Inside was a section on nurses, how they cared for others, especially those without families. Something tugged at my heart. Maybe I couldn't change my past. But maybe I could stop another child from feeling unwanted. That night, I knew I would become a nurse. On my 18th birthday, Sister Agatha gave me the wrapper. "Keep it," she said. "You're going into the world now. You should carry her memory with you, whatever form that takes." I left the orphanage the next day with only two things, the wrapper, and the name, Chisholm, which meant God is with me. I clung to it as my truth. Because so far, he was the only parent I had. When my mother finally looked back, the girl who would not break, Lagos, the city hummed like a restless drum. Horns blared, buses groaned under the weight of too many passengers, and hawkers yelled prices for everything from boiled corn to fake iPhones. It was chaotic, but to me, it felt like freedom that I had been accepted into a government nursing school on the mainland. It wasn't the best, but it was something. I rented a tiny room in a crumbling one-story building in Ajij. The ceiling leaked, rats ran around like tenants, but I didn't care. I finally had a chance to live for myself. That I kept my wrapper in a small wooden box under the bed, sealed with a ribbon. I'd open it only when things felt too heavy, when the loneliness crawled back in. I always stared at it like a relic, like it held answers I still didn't know how to ask. Nursing school was tough. We had 12-hour practicals at understaffed hospitals. Patients screamed, babies wailed, and sometimes we were the only comfort the dying had. My classmates complained. "I just worked harder, you day try, Chisholm," one of the lecturers once told me. "You get heart." But it wasn't just heart, it was survival. I needed to become someone. Not for fame. Not even for wealth. But so that one day, if my mother was still out there, she'd hear my name somewhere, on the news, maybe. And she'd whisper, "That's my daughter." One afternoon, during a shift at General Hospital, I helped deliver a baby girl. The mother had no one beside her. Her eyes were swollen with panic. She was barely 17. As she held the baby for the first time, she began to cry, not tears of joy, but of fear. She tried to give the baby to me. "Please, take her." "I can't do it," she sobbed. Suddenly, my hands went cold. It was like a scene from a buried memory. I wanted to shout. I wanted to beg her not to walk away like mine had. But instead, I knelt beside her and whispered, "You can do this. Don't be the pain your daughter will carry forever." She kept the child. And I walked out of that room shaking, unable to breathe. For hours, I cried in the hospital restroom, the echo of my own abandonment pressing against my ribs. That night, I made a decision that I would find her, not to curse her. Not to demand answers. I just wanted to see her face. To know if she ever missed me. To understand that I started my search from the orphanage records. Sister Agatha was retired, but the new head nun allowed me access. I found the original note she left with me. The ink had faded, but one detail stood out, a name written in the corner, Ifeoma Ease, that was the first clue. With the help of a friend studying social work, we searched birth records, electoral registers, and church wedding logs. Nigeria has millions of people. But in a few weeks, we had a possible hit. A woman named Ifeoma Ease, now Ifeoma Nwafor, living in Anambra State. Married to a wealthy business tycoon. 3 children. Regularly featured in women empowerment conferences. She looked radiant in the pictures we found online. Designer gelly. Gold jewelry. A bright smile that my chest clenched. Could this truly be her? I stared at the photo for hours, zooming into her eyes. Something about them felt familiar. That same sadness hiding under the glamour, but I needed to be sure that I traveled to Anambra alone. It was my first time stepping foot back in the East since my childhood. The air felt different, richer, slower. People spoke Igbo fluently. I barely could anymore, and I felt like a stranger. I stayed in a cheap guest house and took a taxi to her home, a white mansion behind a tall black gate. Armed guards stood outside. There were flowers, fountains, and cars that could pay a year's salary for most nurses. My knees trembled as I approached. I told the guard I was there to speak to Madame Ifeoma about a personal matter. He frowned. Who are you? Tell her Chisholm is here. She may know the name. The guard disappeared inside. 5 minutes later, he returned. She say she know you. You fit go. I stood there, stunned. Please, just let me speak with her, 5 minutes. She no want see you, auntie. Just like that, the gate closed. And with it, the possibility I had dreamed about for 20 years. I returned the next day. Then the day after. On the 4th day, she sent someone with an envelope. It had a short note inside. I do not know who you are. Please stop coming here. My heart cracked in places I didn't know still existed. She knew. She had to. The name, the timing, it couldn't be a coincidence that I left that city numb. Like a child rejected twice. This time, it hurt worse, because I had found her. And she had chosen to pretend I never existed. I went silent for weeks. Missed classes. Avoided friends. I refused to speak of it. Until one night, I opened the wooden box under my bed and removed the wrapper. I pressed it against my cheek, letting tears soak it, whispering the words I wished she had said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When my mother finally looked back, when truth burns the tongue. It had been almost a year since I stood outside her mansion in Anambra, clutching that painful envelope. I had forced myself to move forward, to pour myself into my work and leave the past buried, but the past has a spine, and sometimes, when it grows tired of being ignored, it stands tall and knocks on your door. It started with a call from a private number. I was just returning from a night shift at the hospital. Exhausted, sweaty, and barely able to keep my eyes open, I answered out of reflex, hello? There was silence, then a voice, quiet, cautious, aged with time and grace, is this Chisholm? I froze. My heart lurched like someone had just whispered my name from inside a sealed grave. Who is this? More silence. Then she spoke again. This is Ifeoma. The name hit like ice water down my spine. My tongue failed me. My knees weakened. I had imagined this moment so many times, dreamt of it, rehearsed the words I would say. But now, they were all gone. She cleared her throat. I think, we need to talk. We met in a quiet cafe in Enugu, far from her home, far from the curious eyes of society women or news reporters. She came alone, no makeup, no jewelry, just a simple wrapper and a scarf tied neatly over her hair that I almost didn't recognize her. But the eyes were the same. She sat across from me, and for the first few minutes, we simply stared. Then, she spoke. "I've been haunted by your face since you left my gate last year." I said nothing. I wanted her to keep talking, to open herself without interruption, like a wound finally exposed to air. "I knew it was you," she continued, "the moment they said the name. But I was afraid. I had buried you so deep, I didn't know how to exhume the shame." She looked down at her trembling hands. I was 22. My parents had just disowned me for getting pregnant by a married man. I had nowhere to go, no job, no help. I begged him to take responsibility, but he vanished. I was alone, starving. The church was the only place that didn't close its gates. I listened, stone-faced, and when I gave birth to you, her voice cracked. You were so beautiful. I held you for days, hoping some miracle would change my fate. But the hunger, the shame, the fear, they won. She sighed deeply. "I left you at the church not because I didn't love you, but because I thought love wasn't enough." I sat silently, every muscle in my body trembling. "You could have come back for me," I whispered, tears finally leaking out. "I did," she replied quickly, her eyes desperate. 2 weeks later, I returned, but the nuns told me you had been taken in by social workers. They wouldn't tell me where. I shook my head, heart pounding. "They lied," I said. "I was there all along. Until I was 18. She gasped. Her lips quivered. "No, no, that can't be." "It is." I waited. I hoped. For 18 years. She covered her face and began to sob. Loud, aching sobs that drew stares from the waiters. But I didn't stop her. I let her weep, because those were the tears I cried every year on my birthday. "I tried to forget you," she said, between breaths. "I told myself you were better off without me. But I never stopped seeing your face in every little girl I passed. And when you showed up at my gate, I panicked. I asked the question I had buried deep in my chest for years: do you love me, or are you just sorry?" She looked up, eyes red, and said, "Both. I'm sorry, deeply. And I love you, though I know I have no right to." We sat there for hours. Talking. Crying. Laughing once, even, when I told her how I once slapped a boy in school who mocked me for being church-born. She told me about her new family. Her 3 children. How she never told them about me. How her husband didn't know either. "I was afraid of judgment," she confessed. "Afraid they'd hate me. Afraid they'd think I was less." "Do they know now?" I asked. She shook her head. "But I want them to. I want to make things right, Chisholm. If you'll let me." I didn't answer right away. How do you reconcile a broken childhood in one afternoon? How do you erase the nights you begged God for your mother to hold you, when she was out there building a new life? But I saw her pain. Her vulnerability. Her willingness to try, and maybe, just maybe, I could try too. So, I said, let's start with the truth. Weeks later, she invited me to her home, this time as a guest, not a stranger at the gate. Her husband was away. Her children were in boarding school. She showed me photo albums, stories of her journey, and finally, the small box where she kept a single picture of me as a baby. "I took it the day after you were born," she said, brushing dust off the frame. "I never showed it to anyone. But I looked at it every time I doubted myself. It was the first time I saw myself as a baby. The same teardrop-shaped birthmark behind my ear. The same eyes that I broke down." That night, I stayed in her house. She cooked okra soup for me. We sat and talked like two women learning each other for the first time. In the middle of the night, she knocked on my door and said, "Can I hold you?" I nodded. She wrapped her arms around me and whispered over and over, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And for the first time in my life, I felt what it meant to be mothered. When my mother finally looked back, what forgiveness feels like. Forgiveness is not like a switch you flip, it's more like sunrise. Slow. Hesitant. Sometimes hidden behind clouds. Even after that night in her arms, I woke up uncertain. I watched her in the kitchen the next morning, humming as she sliced onions for breakfast. She moved gracefully, but her eyes still held shadows. The kind of darkness that only a mother who lost and found her child would carry. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. I nodded, forcing a smile. She placed a warm plate of yam and egg before me. "Eat. You're too skinny." We both laughed. That small, cautious laughter. The kind that hopes joy is real but prepares for pain. Later that afternoon, her husband returned from his business trip. I wasn't supposed to be there when he arrived. But somehow, I stayed. He was tall, confident, with an air of silent power. His suit looked expensive, his scent filled the room like a signature. He paused when he saw me. "This is?" he asked, confused. Ifeoma stood beside me. Her hands trembled slightly. "This is Chisholm. My daughter." A silence heavier than iron dropped over us. He blinked. "You're what?" "My daughter. From before I met you. I gave birth to her at 22. I left her at the church, and now she's here." He turned to me. His face unreadable. Then back to her. "You never told me you had a child." "I know. I was ashamed." He stepped back, his jaw clenched. "You lied to me for over 20 years. "No," she said. "I hid. There's a difference." I stood quietly, unsure whether to run or speak. But her husband turned to me and asked the most unexpected question. "What do you want from us?" It wasn't cruel. It was cautious. I swallowed. "Nothing. I'm not here for money or pity. I just wanted to meet her. That's all." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded, and without another word, walked away into his study. Ifeoma stood there, blinking back tears. "That went better than I expected," she whispered. We both laughed, again, that cautious laughter. A few weeks later, she asked if I would meet my half-siblings. I said yes. The two boys were 17 and 15. Her daughter, Adaora, was 11. They were beautiful, polite, and clearly well brought up. But when she told them who I was, confusion twisted their faces. "But, we're your only children," the youngest said. "No, Ada," she replied gently. "You're not. Chisholm is your big sister. I made a terrible mistake before I had you all. But I'm trying to make it right." The boys were quiet. Adaora stared at me for a long time before suddenly asking, "Do you like ice cream?" I blinked. Yeah." She smiled. "Good. Then you're really my sister." We all laughed. Later that day, the boys joined us in the living room. One of them offered me his game controller. The other asked if I wanted to join their football match later. It was awkward. Clumsy. But real, the beginning of something that my life didn't magically transform. I still returned to Lagos. Still worked shifts at the hospital. Still walked the muddy roads after rain with my worn-out sneakers, but now, I had someone who called me just to ask how my day went, someone who said, "I love you," at the end of a phone call. A mother. Sometimes, we spent weekends together. She visited me in Lagos once, wearing sunglasses and jeans. She said she wanted to feel young again. We went to the cinema. She insisted on popcorn even though she hated the butter. At night, we sat by the window of my little room, and she apologized again, not because I asked, but because she meant it. The media found out 6 months later. A gossip blog posted a story: top CEO's wife hides love child for 22 years. The backlash was fierce. Some insulted her. Some praised her honesty. Her husband was furious, not at me, but at the invasion of privacy. But through it all, she never once denied me. Instead, she gave a speech at a women's empowerment forum. "My biggest failure," she said into the microphone, "was not being there for my first child. But my greatest redemption is being given the chance to love her now." I was sitting in the back, hiding behind dark glasses. But my heart felt like the sun. The story faded, as all stories do. But the bond we built remained. She sponsored me through a private nursing university. Helped me set up a small foundation for orphaned girls. We named it Chisholm's Light. Sometimes, when she introduces me at events, she holds my hand and says, "This is my daughter."